Welcome back. We're ready to get started again. We'll reconvene this meeting of the State Senate Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Communications. We're going to start with Senator Mani's SB 1090. Welcome, Senator.
Supervisor here from Slow County. He was here this morning. If he walks in, I want him to go and one of you guys. I don't know. We're trying to get him. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, on January 11th of this year, the California Public Utilities Commission approved PG&E's request to retire Diablo Canyon Nuclear Facility by 2025. But to our disappointment, the PUC did not approve the Community Impact Mitigation Program or fully fund the Employee Retention Program that are vital components to the success of the plant's retirement. Both of these programs will provide a bridge to our region as the transition to closure of Diablo Canyon moves forward. Senate Bill 1090 authorizes the CPUC to approve elements of the joint proposal that was submitted as part of the retirement application, including $85 million for the Community Impact Mitigation Program, requires full funding of the Employee Retention Program, and directs the PUC to manage its integrated resource plan to ensure that there's no increase of greenhouse gas emissions as a result of the retirement. The community has assumed the public safety risk for the past 33 years, while all PG&E customers have realized the benefits over the past several decades. Residents will continue to shoulder the risk as the plant continues to operate and beyond its closure, as the spent fuel rods will continue to be housed there. This is Mr. Chair, an emergency planning calendar that is distributed every year to residents by the Office of Emergency Services. It has a page on how to use and obtain potassium iodide in the event of radiation exposure. It provides evacuation routes out of San Luis Obispo County for residents in the event of a nuclear accident at the facility. The calendar also provides a tear-off slip to mail in to secure potassium iodide for residents. I share this because of the extraordinary risk that has been shouldered and will continue to be shouldered by residents, while all PG&E customers have benefited from the energy generated by the plant and will continue over the next 7 years to benefit from the energy generated. The community, including stakeholders that represent labor, environmental community, local government, and PG&E, have spent hours, weeks, and months negotiating the joint proposal. My principal co-author is Assemblymember Cunningham, who also represents San Luis Obispo County. And Mr. Chair, with your permission, would like to present witnesses in support of the bill this afternoon, starting with representatives of IBEW Local 1245.
Mr. Chairman and members, Scott Wetch on behalf of the California Coalition of Utility Employees and the State Association of Electrical Workers. Requiring retention payments and severance packages to the workforce of nuclear facilities that are being decommissioned is not without precedent. It is common operating procedure. In fact, during the PUC process, everyone who participated with expertise in employee management of nuclear decommissioning agreed that retention programs were appropriate and necessary. Without those retention programs, the folks, the critical staff that operate and keep the nuke operating safely will seek employment. There's headhunters who go out and search these people out to go to work in other states, in new facilities and in existing facilities. In fact, federal law requires a shutdown of facilities if they do not have adequate licensed operators. during the proceeding before the PUC, the Office of Ratepayer Advocate was the outlier. They agreed that payment needed to be paid, but in 4 short paragraphs with no expert, no analysis, no data, just opinion, they said that the retention package, which was collectively bargained by the IBEW, was too much. On that point, Mr. Chairman, we were very active in the efforts to keep Diablo Canyon open. When we started into discussions with the potential of closing or not seeking re-permitting, we negotiated through collective bargaining a severance and retention package that was part of our decision not to pursue other legal remedies that we had to us to block the shutdown of Diablo Canyon. So to not be able to fulfill our commitments to our workers that we negotiated again in a collective bargaining process is just something that's unacceptable to us. With me today is an operator who drove all the way from San Luis Obispo, Mr. Chairman, to talk about how the facility operates and the ramifications of not having an adequate retention package. So I'd like to have him say a few words.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jeremy Wynn, and I am a licensed reactor operator at Diablo Canyon Power Plant. I've been working at the power plant for approximately 19 years. I am 41 years old. I have a wife. I have 2 kids, 2 boys. My oldest is entering high school next year, my youngest in junior high. I grew up in Santa Barbara County, just south of San Luis County, where the power plant resides. I'm lucky enough and have worked hard enough to build myself a career that has allowed me to raise my family in the very same community in which my wife and I were raised. My dream has been for my boys to attend the same high school that I attended and that my wife and I both graduated from. I currently am enjoying coaching both of my sons in their baseball teams, both in Little League and Babe Ruth. It's here that I not only teach my sons about baseball, teamwork, and discipline, but I also get to the chance to help other young men in the community as I'm vice president on our Little League board. At the power plant itself, I have worked hard to establish myself as a knowledgeable, dependable coworker. I started working at Diablo Canyon when I was 22 years old. I successfully completed the apprenticeship program, which is a 3-year program, and then also retained my NRC license, which is a 2-year program. Both of these courses are highly trained, highly tested, and administered by the federal government NRC, in which I received my NRC license. It is this training that makes us highly specialized and unique, and it also makes it extremely difficult for us to find other work that is comparable outside of nuclear power. That, in point, is what has a lot of us looking for employment elsewhere. It's not inside of California. It's inside the nuclear industry. As the nuclear industry begins to shrink in size as more and more power plants close, that the hunting for more jobs becomes more and more difficult. So employees are now beginning to look now. They're not waiting for the power plant to close. With a 15% retention package that was authorized by the CPUC, we have employees that have already, although signed that retention agreement, have already decided to seek other employment. We feel a 25% bonus or retention package is actually more adequate to help employees decide to stay at the power plant and allow the power plant to continue operating through its end of license in 2025. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could present the Chair of the Board of Supervisors from San Luis Obispo County, Mr. John Pashung.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members, as you know, Senate Bill 1090 has been constructed as a 3-leg stool to maintain the safe and secure operation of the plant to its retirement. The bridge funding provided by the Community Impact Mitigation Program is at least as important as the other 2 legs of the stool. PG&E announced on June 2016 that it would not seek to renew the federal licenses for Diablo Canyon's Unit 1 and 2 when those licenses expire in 2024 and 2025. Although PG&E had negotiated closure terms for some other parties and had included community mitigation funds of $49 million in that settlement, it soon became clear that the $49 million was an inadequate amount to maintain services during the 9-year closure period. San Luis Obispo County San Luis Coastal Unified School District, and the 7 cities in our county began meeting with PG&E and the Franchise Tax Board to try and determine the true effect of the decisions to set a plant retirement date. In the end, we arrived at a figure of $85 million to be collected as part of rates over a 9-year period. The Community Impact Mitigation Fund has 2 components. The Essential Services Mitigation Fund would consist of $75 million, and it's designed to sustain essential services at the current levels. The services to be funded include the Sheriff's Department, public health and safety programs, fire districts, water, flood control districts, infrastructure maintenance, and educational programs and school staff. The Economic Development Fund of $10 million is designed to provide seed funding for early and targeted local economic redevelopment by the county and its 7 cities. It is crucial that the plant's host community begin restructuring its economy before the closure. The Community Impact Mitigation Fund is a bridge funding to allow safe plant operation by experienced Diablo employees until plant retirement. Employee retention is essential for Diablo Canyon because each nuclear power plant has unique operating requirements. Our plan allows the existing experienced workforce at Diablo to avoid leaving for better jobs at plants that are not planning to close across the country. These employees will be assisted with the employee retention components of this bill, but they need to be assured that their community will continue to provide them for their families with decent education opportunities and necessary public services. The ratepayers will see a small increase in their energy bills, a few cents per month, plus the program does not go on in perpetuity. The rate increases will be in effect for about 8 years. This is the equitable bridge funding support provision for the community that has supported the plant during its entire operating life and will support the spent fuel facility at the plant for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Do we have speakers in support? If you could state your name.
Mr. Chairman and members, Delaney Hunter on behalf of the San Luis Coastal Unified School District. We are the school district that's most impacted by this facility. As Supervisor Pashong mentioned, we see this funding as a bridge. We know we have things we have to do to get our budget ready for the eventual closure. This is just needed so that we don't drop off a cliff. For us, it's 110 teachers on 4 schools we'd have to close if we don't have the bill passed today. And for those reasons, we urge your support.
Mr. Chair, Josh Malone for the Natural Resources Defense Council, also in support of this. We believe this will enable safe closure of this plant and also replacement of safe low-carbon energy alternatives. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Frank Lind. I'm the retired General Counsel of the Public Utilities Commission. I'm here today on behalf of Friends of the Earth, and we support the legislation. Thank you.
Richard Harmon on behalf of the City of Pismo Beach in strong support of the legislation.
Rochelle Becker, Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility, in support of the legislation. We are the only county that gets a calendar every year. The first 10 pages are how to evacuate the radiation zones. This is very important. We are the only county that has potassium iodide pills in case there's a radioactive release. So when Turn says other facilities closed and they don't get payments, nobody else has these.
Those points were mentioned, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I rushed in and
Okay.
to get them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Mannheim, PG&E, we're in support of the bill. The decision to close Diablo Canyon has been made, and that's a permanent decision. It's been approved by the Public Utilities Commission. But the coalition of groups that came together to join in that proposal did so to create a 7-year advance period. This is the first time for a nuclear power plant closure has been managed in a way that you have 7 years to deal with the impacts, the replacement of those facilities. And the blueprint was to replace Diablo Canyon with greenhouse gas-free resources. It's critical for that mission to be successful that you have the staff necessary to operate the plant safely through that 7-year period. Diablo is one of the finest operating plants in the country. It has an incredible safety record, and we need to keep that team there at the plant, operating through to the finish line.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Chairman, members of the board, committee. My name is Greg Hayward. I'm a reactor instrumentation and control technician at Diablo and an IBW steward. And I just wanted to state my case is also that the 15% is not worth it, not only to myself, but I hear from many other similar members who, as a union steward, come to me and tell me that they intend to leave definitely, especially during the last 3-year period, if it stays at just 15%. Some are operators, just like the other individual, and some are other maintenance individuals who perform maintenance on critical reactor safety, response, and monitoring equipment. And I know that the item keeps getting reiterated that if too many of us leave, then the plant can't be safely operated. I'm just another example of that, and speaking on behalf of other members who have directly told me they intend to leave. Thank you.
So I don't understand, you're in support of the bill or you're not?
I'm in support of the bill for having a 25% retention. Many have stated they would stay for the 25%, but would not stay for the 15% retention.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is William Garris. I drove up today from San Luis Obispo. I currently work at PG&E, and I'm a proud member of IBW Local 1245. I'm 44 years old, and I work in the electrical maintenance department at Diablo Canyon. My job is to maintain the electrical components at Diablo. And in addition to completing my 5-year apprenticeship, I also spend hundreds of hours every year learning new skills and maintaining my proficiency on the skills that I already have. This continued training gives me the skill set to ensure the safe and reliable operation of the power plant. On June 2016, Diablo announced it was closing. My department has already seen people leaving. I made the commitment to stay through 2025. When Units 1 and Unit 2 shut down in 2025, I will be 50. 50 is not the best age to start looking for new career opportunities. Another option for me would be to start looking for employment opportunities now. If myself and my coworkers were to do this to secure long-term employment elsewhere, we would be leaving the maintenance department to others who do not have the same level of training and who do not have the time to become proficient in maintaining and operating plant. The reason I agreed to support the power plant through its retirement in 2025 was because of the full retention offered in 2016. The original retention gives me the options and allows me to secure stable employment after 2025.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask the rest of the speakers to try to limit your comments. State your name and who you're representing and your position on the bill, if you can, as much as you can. We have lots of speakers on this bill and lots more bills to hear.
Yes. Charlotte Stevens from IBW 1245. We're in support of the bill.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Jeremy Smith, IBW 1245, in support.
Stephanie Chavez, IBW 1245, and I support the bill.
Nilda Garcia, 1245, in support of the bill to make sure that we retain the employees who are fully trained and keep the operation safe at Diablo Canyon.
Ivan Peretta, IBW Local 1245, in support of the bill for safety. Thank you.
Brian Huffman, 1245, in support of the bill.
Good afternoon. My name is Alvin Deon, an electrical worker here for IBW 1245, and also here to support this bill. Thank you.
Georgette Carrillo, IBW 1245, and I'm in support of the bill.
Kevin Crumist, IBW 1245, here to support the bill to keep fully trained workers at Diablo Canyon. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, John White with the Clean Power Campaign, in support of the bill.
Thank you. Do we have speakers in opposition?
Hello, I'm Mark Toney, Executive Director of TURN, the Utility Reform Network. We have some issues with the bill and would like you to consider a number of things that have happened. The first problem that we have with this bill is that it reverses a CPUC decision. This was fully litigated at the PUC. The PUC agreed to authorize $211 million of a $352 million request by PG&E for employee retention. So it's important to realize that the PUC has gone through a thorough review, a reasonableness review, and they determined that the majority of what PG&E asked for was reasonable, but not the full amount. So that's one. It's really a challenge that if parties are not happy with the PUC decision and the amount that they are awarded, that they feel they can come to the legislature as a court of appeal. If you vote for that, that will happen a lot more. So consider that. We understand that the $85 million that is being requested for the communities has a lot of value. We believe that there are other ways to consider funding that. There's the general fund. There are shareholders. Part of the challenge here is that the $226 million that is being requested here, all of it comes out of PG&E ratepayers. It comes out of people's monthly bills. Our big concern is that Diablo is not the only power plant that has closed down recently. If the legislature decides to make ratepayers pay communities, then nobody in Southern California has gotten funds for songs closing. I would expect them. We're going to see some natural gas power plants probably close at some time in the future. So that's the second thing, is that you're setting a precedent. I think the third consideration is that the legislature has many, many bills that it is considering that has hundreds of millions of dollars of ratepayer impact. There are 3 other bills before the committee today that have large ratepayer impacts. We really want to encourage the legislature to look at, instead of looking at each bill on a case-by-case basis, to really think about a way of looking at all of the bills that have ratepayer impact and bundle them, prioritize them, instead of voting one by one. So please consider other ways of funding very important needs that communities have that we're sympathetic with. And also, please consider not reversing a CPUC decision that a great number of parties were involved in over a long period of time. Thank you very much.
Honorable Chair Hueso and committee members, I'm Dr. Gene Nelson, CGNP Government Liaison. As our name suggests, Californians for Green Nuclear Power is a nonprofit composed of Californians who appreciate the advantages that nuclear power provides for the environment. Our board includes scientists educated at top universities considered to be elite specialists in their field, each with decades of experience. Intervenor, CGNP, timely filed an application for rehearing of PG&E's CPUC application. Hence, the status of that application is currently reopened. We're relatively new to the legislative process, but have stepped forward to help policymakers make wise decisions based on science. Regretfully, we must oppose SB1090 unless it's amended for the following reasons. In an April 11, 2018 phone conversation with me, Environmental Quality Committee consultant Dr. David E. Garcia agreed that, based on my analysis, replacing Diablo Canyon with carbon-free energy is impossible. I've been impressed with the insight and engagement of this committee, and I hope that Chief Consultant to the committee, Nidia Bautista, has substantial and valuable expertise in this area and is familiar with the California energy market. Committee members would be wise to ask her to answer whether Diablo's power could be replaced by new non-greenhouse gas-free sources, or whether this is aspirational but not grounded in reality. Several statutes require the CPUC to consider each decision's effect on the environment and greenhouse gas emissions. In the decision to retire Diablo Canyon, the CPUC unlawfully punted these considerations. It would be extraordinary for the legislature to step in now and set a precedent allowing the CPUC to violate its duties to protect the environment within every proceeding by retroactively changing these statutory duties. These issues are currently being litigated, and it's inappropriate for the legislature to move the goalpost during the pendency of the litigation. SB 1090 contains mostly inoperative legislative findings which basically act as a fig leaf. Section 2 only mandates that the CPUC require plans that are, quote, designed to avoid net increased emissions. It doesn't require anybody to show that Diablo will be replaced with clean power. The task is huge. Diablo produces the equivalent of 5 Hoover dams annually without emitting a speck of carbon.
Thank you, sir. If you can wrap up your comments.
Excuse me?
If you can wrap up your comments.
Yeah, I was just about to, sir.
Okay.
So basically, we have a situation just like what Tern pointed out. It's taking a private utility and forcing the California taxpayer to pay. Marty, would you take over?
I'm Dr. Michael M. Marinac, and I have a PhD in engineering from UC Berkeley. I'm volunteering my time today to represent Californians for Green Nuclear Power, and I'm not representing the views of my employer. The closure of Diablo Canyon is not something the legislature should endorse. Given California's commitment to addressing climate change, the wisdom of abandoning California's largest carbon-free energy source continues to be challenged by engineers, climatologists, environmentalists, and local residents. Diablo Canyon provides 1/10 of California's total electricity needs economically and greenhouse gas-free. SB 1090 will just result in shuffling of existing greenhouse gas resources and improper reliance upon CCAs. Unlike solar and wind, Diablo Canyon is a reliable supply of essential baseload power. Taking Diablo offline will result in the burning of more fossil fuels to meet that need. PG&E testified that much of the replacement power for DCPP would be generated by unregulated community choice aggregators, but there is no way for CPUC to enforce that they would meet the enormous challenge of constructing new greenhouse gas resources to replace Diablo. Also, since CCAs cannot be audited, there is no mechanism to verify any claim regarding the content of the power they sell. For all the foregoing reasons, CGNP asked the committee to consider the following 3 amendments. 1, if PG&E truly believes its statements that Diablo can be replaced with greenhouse gas-free power, it should have no issue with legislative language that requires the CPUC to determine conclusively that this can be done before approving the retirement of Diablo. Thus, SB 1090 should be amended to require the CPUC to withhold its final approval of Diablo's retirement until this has been shown with clear and convincing evidence. 2, if, like with the Song's retirement, greenhouse gas emissions rise in California, then PG&E should pay a penalty concomitant to the penalties paid by heavy emitters. SB 1090 should be amended to require such a penalty. And 3, the taxpayers, your constituents, should not pay for PG&E's decisions. PG&E ratepayers should. The bill should be amended to remove any state obligations to cover the costs associated with the retirement of Diablo. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? Any other speakers in opposition? Okay, we'll come to the committee. Thank you, gentlemen. You know, just generally, who currently owns Diablo Canyon facility?
PG&E.
And will PG&E, in the agreement, is there some agreement that PG&E will maintain this facility until, I mean...
Part of its obligation as part of its NRC license is even after it stops operations, it has a duty for decommissioning in a safe manner and either decontamination of the property or providing ongoing security. What does happen during just this period of ramping down, property assessment is reduced, and that's one of the challenges for offsetting community impacts is what has been received. Even though the plant continues to operate, from a property valuation point of view, the property valuation declines.
And I understand that,
Mhm.
and that's part of what was figured into this equation, but I'm concerned about the future of this property. Is that included in the agreement? Is there some obligation for PG&E not only to maintain, decommission, and restore viable use of land? I mean, is this going to be an eyesore in the community for the next 100 years? Is this going to be a Superfund site for the next 100 years? I mean, who has the obligation to clean it up, make it usable? Will it ever be used again?
Well,
For power
yeah,
generation?
we have an expert here who can answer some of your questions, Mr. Chair. I do know that when it was originally licensed, it was the original NRC operator's license was premised on an understanding that the spent rods would be removed from that locality. That has not been possible, and there's no forecast of a receptacle for the spent fuel rods. So until there is, PG&E will shoulder the burden of maintaining the spent fuel rods based there on the coast at the facility in a safe and secure manner. But with your question about the contract language, let me ask.
Thank you, Bill
please.
Mannheim for PG&E. So we are currently developing the plan for decommissioning of Diablo Canyon. Part of that plan will include the use of the site after the site it's been cleaned up. We've created a public stakeholder group to participate in that, and then there will be, the filing will go to the Public Utilities Commission. That will be filed late next year. So there will be a very broad public participation process to determine the future use of the site. And with respect to the spent nuclear fuel that is being stored in huge concrete and stainless steel canisters at the plant, that will remain there until there is a federal repository for spent fuel. We do have a contract with the federal government to take that fuel, but as you know, Yucca Mountain and any other solutions have been stalled. So we sued the federal government and we settled. The government is now paying the costs of that facility and will continue to pay the costs of that facility until there is a final solution for storage.
So they've been trying to cite a repository since the 1960s with no future site. So we can look at this for the next 100 years. Does that mean that that site will remain as is for the next 100 years? I mean, if there was never a site to remove that nuclear waste, does that mean that that becomes a Superfund site in our state?
I can't predict the future. It's a national problem.
And I'm just talking to the mechanics of it. I'm not asking you to say this will be solved one day or won't, but if it isn't solved, my question is very specific.
Yes.
We're basically looking at a Superfund site.
You can't reuse the property with the nuclear waste.
I mean,
Can
we
you
would-
reuse, can we put a park there? Can we put housing there? Can we put what can we put there? A battery site there? What can we put?
The actual storage facility, which is about the size of a football field, will need to be secured. But it's a huge site, and it's potentially possible that other parts of the site could be released for public use. The federal government is looking potentially at interim storage as a solution where fuel would be moved there until there was a final solution, but that's still early stages.
And you could go on, continue paying taxes on this property with the improvements that it has now, even if it has a lesser appraisal, you're still going to continue to pay taxes as long as you own the property.
Yes, but the high value of the facility is the power plant. The appraised value is very small for the spent fuel storage facility. So while there will still continue to be a very small property tax base, it's a tiny portion of what's being paid today.
Okay. You know, we looked at this bill, and this is first of all, Senator Monning, I commend you for being just the consummate advocate for your district. No one is better. And lots of respect for you and your work, and I want to support you today. It's hard through this process to support a bill that we can't amend, and you have not made yourself available to amendments of the bill. And that makes it very difficult because I think there are a lot of unresolved issues, and I don't want to associate myself with a project that will be a permanent blight on a community, especially somewhere as beautiful as San Luis Obispo, a place that's really magical in California's landscape and especially our coast. This is our coastline, and having this project here came with lots of promises. Some were delivered. Power that was very cheap and did not contaminate the air, but others that were not delivered, that this waste would be located somewhere in a safe location that wouldn't impact the environment and people's health, and that has not been realized. That is something that, once again, as we deal with issues here locally, something that the federal government has failed to deliver on. And that is something we expect may not change in the recent years. I would like there to be a little more accountability worked into this plan, a plan that PG&E continue to pay into the tax base there with this property, as if it were operating, which would give an incentive to clean it up and remove it, and that ratepayers not have to be part of that. If PG&E needs an incentive to clean up that location and move out of that facility and make it available for a more productive use. And you talk about wanting to influence the economy in San Luis Obispo, and this is probably one of the most valuable sites to do that. Waterfront land here is always at a premium in California. But it's hard to work on a bill that we can't amend, and for that reason, what I'm going to do today, because this is a very difficult issue, and I want to give you the ability to work on that, and because I respect that you will. I want to support the bill today to get it out of committee, but I reserve the right not to support it in the floor, because I think we can put together a better deal. Every time I analyze this bill, the number in terms of that's being assigned to ratepayers is growing and growing and growing, and now it's really at $500 million almost, $420 million to close down this facility, borne by ratepayers. It's a hard pill to swallow for me, and I don't think there's enough accountability worked into this bill to ensure that one day that site will be cleaned up and will be restored to productive use for the benefit of the community, whether it be a park, whether it be a waterfront development of some sorts that would contribute to the economy of San Luis Obispo. We need to make San Luis Obispo a sustainable community, keep those schools open, and keep the people working. And for that, I want to support you today, but I encourage you to work on this bill because this is going to be a tough bill to get through the legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I appreciate your expertise and that of your staff, and I appreciate their engagement. If I could just offer a short close to hit some of the points, or do you have members that?
I'll give you an opportunity to close, but
Yes.
we have some members that probably
Okay.
have ask
Good.
some questions or make some comments.
Thank
Beginning
you.
with Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just, and I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chair. I agree with those. I think that there are other opportunities here and that may be able to flush those out over the next a month or so, but I do think that it's important that we look at the community impact, that we take that into consideration and the risk that community has lived with. And there's a cost to that risk. A cost to those who presented that risk. If you live within a risk and you buy insurance, you pay more for the insurance. So in this case, the community, the larger community that benefited from that plant should be subject to higher costs at the end of the day to support the community based on that risk that they had and for really the safe retirement of the plant for the community. So I support it, and I think we just need to fine-tune it to a point where it works for everyone's benefit, but I think the concept is great, and thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to echo the comments made by the chairman. I, too, have concerns, not necessarily for your efforts here, Mr. Monty, but our overall approach to decommissioning nuclear facilities. And it's far different than other parts of the world, especially Norway, where I visited nuclear plants, and communities literally fight to have those storage facilities in their communities because they know how important nuclear energy is sustaining their community, and they know how clean nuclear energy is. We sell a misnomer that nuclear energy is dirty, and it's the farthest thing from the truth. What's dangerous is the spent rods afterwards, and how do we store it? So I know that is of a great concern to me and those residents there and everybody in the state of California, and I think we really do need to nail down what we do with these spent rods and how to safely store that, because that is my great concern. But at the same time, all the ratepayers shouldn't have to bore that cost indefinitely, and I think we do need to have a little bit more concise plan on how we clean up that area and move forward. So I'm going to support it today, but I will help support you in any way moving forward. All right.
Yeah.
Senator, thank you. I appreciate you coming to my office and speaking with me about this bill. And I like the author, but it's going to be difficult for me to be there. As I mentioned to you, I hate to see the ratepayers having to have that passed on. So just want to share that. But I sure appreciate how hard you worked on this and clearly communicating with me. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Do we have a motion? We have a motion. You want to make some closing statements?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you to the chair and your staff and for all committee members for the time you've spent meeting with me and with other advocates. Real briefly, one thing this bill isn't is to decide whether or not Diablo should continue operating. Some people were making that argument. I respect their passion, their knowledge, their command of science. That decision has been made. The plant is set to close 2024, 2025. Stakeholders negotiated in anticipation of immediate impacts, even while the plant still operates for the next 7 years, but the property value is decreased. A component, the community impact piece, we heard from the chair of the Board of Supervisors, the cities in the county, the school districts, all looking at transition support, not ultimate solutions, but they look at that transition support as having not only hosted the risk, but they will continue to shoulder the risk, and they know they have to diversify their economic dependence. The question, the really core issue that's been raised by many, including Tern, is this an appropriate cost to ask ratepayers to pay? And the simple answer is yes. And the reason, I mean, I'm the first or among many in this legislature who fight to protect ratepayers. In this instance, the ratepayers, which is the PG&E footprint, it's not taxpayers of the state of California, it's ratepayers who receive energy today, tonight, from PG&E. And they're in Northern California, they're in the Central Valley, they're on the Central Coast. Those ratepayers have been receiving energy, 10% of the state grid, 20% of the PG&E production for PG&E customers has come from Diablo Canyon. So for 34 years, they've enjoyed that, while many haven't shouldered the immediate risk that residents have in San Luis Obispo County. They'll continue to receive that energy production during the period of this ratepayer assessment, which, while it adds up to a lot of dollars, I would submit is de minimis, 18 cents average per ratepayer per month, not in perpetuity, but for 7 years until the decommissioning of the plant. And then the final point, the decommissioning, the future use of that property, PG&E can't just walk away. Under their NRC licensing, they have an obligation to leave that facility clean, to remove hazards, and to protect the public health and security. And finally, the linkage of this bill and why are we now using legislation. The PUC review of the stakeholder agreement, the PUC said we need legislation. We don't believe we have the authority to approve the community impacts piece. That's why we're here. The PUC, some of the members said, we think it's a fair negotiated agreement. Unfortunately, we don't believe we have the authority to approve it in all of its elements. So with that, we are trying to link community safety, predictability, conversion to reliable, safe energy in the last decommissioning of a nuclear facility in the state of California. So concerns of this setting some kind of precedent, friends, this is the last nuclear facility in operation in the state of California. We don't know what the future might bring with energy needs. We know we're doing a good job with renewable. But again, I thank you for your indulgence and encourage an aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have a motion. Clerk, please call the roll.
Do pass to the Environmental Quality Committee. Wesso?
Aye.
Wesso, aye. Morel?
No.
Morel, no. Bradford?
Aye.
Bradford, aye. Canella?
Aye.
Canella, aye. Hertzberg?
Aye.
Hertzberg, aye. Hill?
Aye.
Hill, aye. McGuire? Skinner? Stern?
Aye.
Stern, aye. Vidak?
Aye.
Vidak, aye. Weiner? 7-1. Want to leave it on call?
Okay, that bill has 7 to 1, has enough to get out. We're going to leave it on call for absent members. Thank you. Senator Anderson, SB 1169.